Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Squid Sisters Stories. I know this is a few days late, and this thing came out a few days ago, actually, and chances are within the next couple days there's going to be a chapter 2, or maybe even today, who knows. But I thought I'd just sort of cover the ground that we missed. I did say that I wanted to cover all of the chapters in as much depth as I could do without scripting, because this is, again, kind of another impromptu video. Anyway, I took a look at it, and over the past few days I've been thinking about it, and I think I found some pretty interesting little cues here and there, so let's get into it. So, the final Splatfest rocketed the Squid Sisters to new heights of popularity. Callie and Marie went from mere Inkopolis idols to the biggest stars in Inkling society, seemingly overnight. Their days became filled from dawn to dusk with the duties of this newfound fame. Callie and Marie still lived in the first apartment they rented upon moving to Inkopolis. It had all happened naturally when they'd first arrived. Being roommates made adjusting to city life easier, and besides, the two had been inseparable since they were young. But even after their finances had stabilized, and they gotten used to the bustle of Inkopolis, they never gave a thought to living apart. They were always together, both at work and at play. After releasing their first solo recordings, though, their work began to take them down separate paths more frequently. Callie, true to her outgoing nature, began to make guest appearances on variety shows. Filming would often continue late into the night, and many days she didn't return home at all. Marie received critical praise for her recording of Tide Goes Out and became a frequent guest on music shows, in addition to performing live concerts of her own. Up to this point, whether heading out for the day or coming home at night, the two had always been together. Now, though, their different schedules meant they didn't see each other as often, even on their days off. They spent more and more time apart with each passing day. Okay, so there's a couple of interesting things here. Not too much to dissect, but there's certainly some interesting things here. So first is the illustrations that they give here, which are always really, really nice. So last time was absolutely gorgeous, but this time is pretty nice too. Gives a kind of, the watercolor that they've been going with the previous Squid Sisters Stories. But right here on the top we see one of Callie's boots next to Marie's boots. And really interesting, because in the next image we see that her boots are gone and Marie's remains, which kind of implies that Marie is going to be slightly more important than her counterpart this time around, or at least I don't understand why they would want to specify through imagery that one is gone and the other remains. I felt like that might have been some sort of subliminal message of some sort, but in any case, that's just in and of itself interesting. Another thing is to note the kind of language that they're using in order to tell these stories. So obviously from the last one we learned that this is actually being told from the perspective of someone who witnessed the last Splatfest. So this is actually, you always have to keep in mind that this is actually from the perspective of a living, breathing narrator within the world of Splatoon. So this is actually a character. Whether or not we'll see this character within the game is unknown. I kind of hope that we do, because that would be really, really cool if they link that up together. It's really interesting. So they start talking about the duties of this newfound fame and such. Callie and Marie still lived in the first apartment they rented. And then it started talking about, they had been inseparable since they were young, but after their finances had stabilized, they'd gotten used to the bustle of Inkopolis, they never gave a thought to living apart. Now, I've gotten a lot of comments in the past about Splatoon being a kid's game, and Nintendo is Nintendo, so they wouldn't ever make it go this way or that way or the other thing. But judging on how they've been marketing the Switch, first of all, I know this seems like it doesn't have anything to do with what's going on here, but just bear with me. Just seeing how they've been marketing the Switch so far, and how they've been handling their PR, and the kinds of people that they've been associating with, and the kinds of games that they've been promoting, they've shown a certain level of increasing maturity in terms of what they're willing to actually put in their games, and not only what they're willing to put in their games, but who they're marketing their games to. And this is just another one of those examples, I think, because right here they're talking about, like, they're talking about, sort of adult issues like, moving into apartments and stuff like that together, and stabilizing finances, and just kind of alien topics to children, I would think. It's not anything too big, because obviously, I think most kids nowadays, of a certain age could probably understand what's going on here. It's just that it's more specific. It provides a lot of insight into things that you wouldn't really think were necessary to know, like the Squid Sisters stabilizing their finances and moving into apartments together and whatnot. And then talking about, oh, she received critical praise for her recording of Tide Goes Out and became a frequent guest on music shows and variety shows and solo recordings and things like that. Now, those aren't, as I said, those aren't necessarily alien topics to younger demographics, but it's certainly a whole lot easier to understand the concept of how taxing and how stressful these kinds of things could be if you're an adult and you understand how time works and you understand that schedules aren't unlimited once you get older, and once especially you get more popular, there's more of a demand for XYZ product that you're advertising for. Once you get into the public eye, people are constantly expecting things of you, and your personal life starts dissipating, and your personal life is no longer your own. Your personal life is in the spotlight, and certainly that seems the case with Callie and Marie. So I figured, it's a very small thing, but I figured that might be an indicator as to the kind of tone and the kind of depth of the story that we're dealing with this time is. I know last time I got a lot of flack for sort of jumping the gun a little bit too far on the sort of governmental takeover on our last Splatoon 2 video. Not the last one, but the one prior. I think one of the main responses was, oh, this is kind of a too dark story and too dark of a theory in order to be expecting this much out of a silly Nintendo game. And while I agree that Nintendo in the past has sort of exemplified that they don't necessarily have an interest in making stories that are particularly mind-blowingly complex and things like that, I think that they have actually done that in the past before. I want to say the Wii era. They've put a lot of attention to detail into backstory and lore and things like that, and building the worlds of their games. I think they're going back to that. Judging by how they're handling the Splatoon 2 story, which is a game that isn't even out yet, and we already know a lot of lore behind, and clearly they're trying to build up this world, I don't think it's out of the question to say that this may actually be one of the more mature stories if you want to look hard enough for it. Sure, the rating will say E or E10 based on whatever it is that the content entails, but I think in terms of lore, we're looking at a much deeper story in terms of how they're going to be telling their narrative, and how they're going to, and how detailed they're going to be just about everything. This kind of reminds me of how in Pikmin 2, Olimar would constantly, if you read his Piclopedia entries, he would just constantly be talking about his family life and how he has problems, with his wife sometimes, and he wishes he could see his children again, and then he talks about his work problems with his boss, and then he goes into all of these biological explanations that are completely alien to children. And I was thinking, as I was reading this, that like, yeah, this is kind of, it reads a little bit more mature than you would think a game for children would actually read. So just again, some speculation, nothing concrete or anything like that, but I just still think it's incredibly interesting how Nintendo is handling their story for Splatoon 2, and I really, really cannot wait to see more. So tell me what you guys think in the comments. We'll talk about it, we'll discuss it, etc. Just let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.